the Heidi Harris Show. You know, I like to talk about things that actually matter with people who actually matter and people who care about some of the same things I do. One of them is a person I follow for years and only recently gotten to know. Brandon Showalter, writes for the Christian Post, has written for the Christian Post for many, many years. Interesting that when you sent me your bio, you were talking about how you were first inspired to pursue a career in writing and journalism while mopping floors and scrubbing toilets as a church custodian in 2015. Let's start with that, Brandon. Talk to me about what you heard at church, what you experienced, what made you care about some of the very interesting and very important social issues you write about.
All I can say about that, Heidi, was, and thanks for the opportunity to join you today. I was just looking for something new to do in my next season, and I was a church janitor at the time. I was in a school program, and I was just praying about what I was to do when I moved. I was going to relocate across the country in a few months, and I just had this spontaneous urge to write. And I wound up submitting a guest blog to a friend who ran a blog ring site, and kept doing that for a couple months. And then months later, after I'd moved back to Washington, D.C., got an email about the need for reporters at the Christian Post, and I was able to use those blogs I had written as writing samples, and the rest is history. But I was just mopping floors and scrubbing toilets one day, praying about my next season, and that's how it all started.
God bless you. Well, you know, it's important because a lot of people like to rag on Washington, D.C. It's the swamp, it's the swamp, it's the swamp. But one of the things I love about Washington, D.C., been there many times, is the idea that somebody can be on a street corner singing about Jesus on the mall. Somebody on the next part of the mall can be protesting war or whatever. And we have the ability to do that in America, which most of the world will never have. And so it's easy to just, paint all of DC with the same brush, and everybody's a jerk and this and that. And it's an amazing place of history, and it's an amazing place of free speech not in every arena. We understand the media, but it's still an incredible place to be.
Yes, it's a very hard place to live, but it's also a blessing. And so I just if you live here and you're called to work here, you sort of learn to roll with it. But it does get heavy at times, and yet I find that when God shows up and moves, it's very powerful here in DC as well. So,
well, I wouldn't know anything about that living in Las Vegas. And let's just say that I don't exactly swim in the cultural stream with everybody else. I mean, there are many, many, many people here who believe what I believe, who are conservative socially and things like that. But the mainstream folks in town, the mainstream media folks and all that, but they can't get rid of me. It's my hometown. They've tried to get rid of me, but I'm thinking, you leave. I was born here, buddy. You leave here. But God put you where he put you, and you're supposed to have some kind of impact, or at the very least, be faithful. And I know that Chuck Colson wrote about this in his book. I think it may have been originally attributed to Mother Teresa, that we're not called to win every battle. But I'm paraphrasing here. I'm sure you've heard this. We're not called to win every battle. We're called to be faithful. And at the end of the day, that's all we can be.
Amen.
Yeah, we can do what we can. So I'm going to talk about a column. I'm going to link this, of course, that you wrote a couple of weeks ago that has gotten a tremendous, even people who never heard of you before are now looking at this and going, what? Here's the headline. After 10 years of covering the trans madness, here's what I learned.
This article that you reference I published it on the 10-year anniversary of my official hire date here at the Christian Post. And I just sort of felt like I had to give a summative look at what it's really like, because if ever there has been media suppression, manipulation, and deception on an issue, it's been around this. And so as one who's lived in this trench for nearly a decade, I felt it important to just spell it all out, because people continue to be deceived, even though there is something of a reckoning going on right now in the sports world with Sophie Cunningham and the WNBA. And even the Wolves in White Coats report that the HHS, the federal agencies, are moving to shut down gender clinics. There's been pushback against this movement, but it's still deeply entrenched, and the media lies around this issue have been incessant and nonstop.
I'm not going to compare it to being a cop, because they have it much worse than we do. But when you are you're in the front line of whatever, you see things that the average people don't see. And so it's very difficult sometimes to keep your bearings and say, look, I've got to put that aside, get back to my Bible, put that aside, go out and touch some grass, because the world isn't, everybody's not doing that. But it's
Yeah.
easy when you're in that world and you're researching it, whether I know people who work in, for example, in sexual assault with children specifically. I would lose my mind if I ever saw one bit of evidence of a child being, I would lose my mind. And they have to do that every day. And God bless them, because if they didn't, there would be nobody out there sending the alarm. So, we have to stay with it, but it can really wear you down. The first image that you saw was a 14-year-old girl, blue hair, bare chested, and she had scars. And for people who and I'll put some pictures up, whatever I can get and use, legally use. These scars across people's chests, if you were a plastic surgeon and somebody had breast cancer, they would probably, sue you for what these chest scars look like. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, Heidi, the transgender medical industry, for lack of a better phrase, markets identity along with their medical services. And so, you know, normally, if, let's say, a woman had breast cancer and had to have a mastectomy, she would not broadcast her scar as something to be celebrated. I mean, but there's this kind of performative aspect of gender surgery, so that if a young girl, a teenage girl, gets her breasts cut off, believing that she's going to be truly a man or a male, like part of the package that is sometimes the surgeons actually pose with these young people that they carve up. And so it's like this display of who you are, that's sort of part and parcel of the whole thing. And so I'm seeing this. You mentioned that young girl that looked all of 14 and blue hair, and I'm seeing a bare-chested minor child, and I'm just shocked by it. But in her mind, it's a form of empowerment, like that this is something to be proud of. And so, yeah, the scars are so ghastly and ghoulish to see, but that's how this is framed. And that's why, I mean, people are actually led to believe, because of the systemic indoctrination and brainwashing of the younger generation, to believe that physical harm to their bodies is actually health, and it's something to be broadcast on social media. Ellen Page, Elliot Page, or whatever, the famous actress. Well, I can't tell you how just disturbing it is to see pictures of her bare chested on my social media timeline. I don't, but if you report it for nudity or whatever, which is not allowed on these platforms, they don't recognize it as such, because Elliot is a man or something. And that's so a bare chested man is not considered pornography. And so the psychological manipulation and the warping of perceptions that the gender medical industry has unleashed on our society now has it has so it has so jarred me, just to see our categories of understanding of what's good and decent be twisted around, because um, people have been led to believe that young girls who have had their body parts cut off posing with bare chests on social media is actually a good thing to be celebrated and applauded.
Right.
And so my conscience and psyche had not been so seared as to believe all of that. And so it's so disturbing to see a disfigured young person for the first time, and then you realize sort of everything that's gone on sort of behind it to make people believe that this is actually a good thing. And then
Well,
the
let me
rest.
stop you there, because you said something that's
Yeah,
important that a lot of people may not pick up on. You talked about your conscience being seared. The Bible talks about that.
yeah,
And that is really important, because people get to a point where their conscience is seared, and they no longer even identify things that
yes,
10 years ago, 5 years ago, we would
right.
have been horrified seeing or hearing about.
The way in which consciences are seared is you're psychologically conditioned
That's
to
right.
accept, to invert
Mhm.
what God calls evil and good. There's that phrase, Isaiah 5:20, woe to those who call evil good and good
That's right.
evil, who use bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter, all of that. And so people have to realize that, concurrent with everything that these doctors are doing when they are disfiguring the bodies of children, um, there's this propaganda campaign happening through the media to break down your moral categories and sear the conscience to make people believe that even things that are evil that 10 or 15 years ago would have been and should have been the subject of a 60-minute investigative special, that a doctor's cutting off the body parts of one child, now there have been thousands and everybody believes that it's okay. Well, that's happening because concurrent with what doctors, if you can even call them that, are doing, media is just flooding the zone with programming where we disfigure young people and calling it entertainment. And so, unless you're saturated in your Bible and your conscience is formed by the things of God, you'll be swept along by ideological evils, and you won't even be able to distinguish between the holy and the profane anymore.
That's right.
To,
That's
to the
true.
point, to the point where we're cutting off the body parts of children and rendering them permanently sterile with experimental chemicals, and people are actually saying it's a good thing. It's very
It's
sobering to consider.
it is sobering. And one of the things that's so important, and I actually know a young lady. I was in the room when she was born, and she's now growing facial hair. Beautiful girl, had a great body. Now she's growing facial hair and everything. And I I'm not a psychologist, but I can tell you that this child is what they call oppositional defiant. Always has been since she was a child, a toddler, and it's made her life very difficult because of the way she is. And this is the perfect outlet to become a trans kid, because now nobody can argue with you. Nobody
Yeah.
can say you're wrong because of, and she's not even, she was married twice. She's not gay. She was
Yeah.
married to two guys. I don't know what she is now, but it breaks my heart to see this happening. And I don't want to veer off on her, but just as an example, you see this. But one of the main things, and you talk about this in your article, about a young lady who had undergone the forearm phalloplasty. That's where they literally take skin, for those who don't know, from your forearm, a flap of skin, and try to form a penis out of that. We're not going to go on a long spiel about that. I'll post some things on that. I see people online talking about it, showing it, and all that kind of stuff, because once again, it's all entertainment now. It's look at me, look how cool I am. But one of the things you mentioned is there was a young girl you saw who had a bunch of self-harm scars. So to your point, and this is what people forget or don't really think about, is that most of these people have serious psychological issues that have not been addressed. Either something they're born with, as in the case of the young lady I know, or something they have experienced, trauma, abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, something that's never addressed. Just go down the hall and get your body parts cut off and take these pills and you'll be okay. And this is something that is extremely important to remember.
The way in which the medical industry has preyed upon the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses and the mental health struggles of, young people is truly diabolical, Heidi. I don't doubt at all that whatever is going on with the person that or even the other people that I have seen pictures of their maimed anatomy, you don't cut the body to heal the mind. And seeing the picture of uh, the woman with self-harm scars, like she was posing next to the doctor who cut off her breast. It's like, what on earth? More, you're giving even deeper scars to someone who already has a bunch of scars on their bodies, and it is absolutely disgraceful. But the core lie that is at the root of this, that's driving this by prominent institutions, is that there's something wrong with your body, that if you have a problem, it's the body is the issue. That could not be more wrong. That is, if you've got a genuine gender confusion, perhaps as a result of trauma or some sort of abuse, that I totally believe that's a psychiatric comorbidity. You need some good counseling to help you with it. The body's not the problem. That you don't cut the body to heal the mind.
Right.
As you address that with good psychological care, good spiritual care, or whatever, that's where you go. But people have found just doctors that do this can not only make money, but they're furthering a fashionable ideology. And this is one of the worst chapters in medical history. And I keep saying, I said this in the piece, if we lived in a normal world, we should be convening tribunals to adjudicate these medical crimes. These are
That's
crimes
right.
against humanity, in my opinion.
People don't understand either. And I realize that many people who follow this issue are aware of what we're saying, but for the people in the back, the people who don't know about this, who've not been in the trenches on this, certainly like you have, I have to a certain extent, but nothing like you've done.
Yeah.
They need to understand that when you get this done, they become a lifetime medical patient. It's not
Yeah.
like you're 14, I'm going to cut off your breasts, I'm going to give you some pills, you're going to be good. You're going to be a boy. No, you're not. You're never going to be a boy. And you are going to be a lifetime medical patient of whoever. Planned Parenthood, obviously, as you know, a huge purveyor of these medications. So is it strictly financial, or is it mostly financial for the doctors and Planned Parenthood? We know it is for them. Or is it ideological for those who don't want anybody to have babies? I mean, is it a combination of both? Where did this all start to gain speed?
It's a fascinating question. I do think it's a combination of ideology and financial motive. I do. I mean, obviously, sometimes those two things are intertwined. The sex change industry does date back, many years, and in the United States, a lot of it germinated with a man by the name of John Money at Johns Hopkins. I mean, his clinic, sorted clinic, he's sort of the famous. If people have seen Matt Walsh's famous movie at the Daily Wire, "What is a Woman?" from a few years ago, he speaks about that some. But he was a perverted monster who experimented on twin boys, one of whom I think died of a drug overdose, the other died by suicide, where during a circumcision it went wrong, and so they did a surgery on that poor young boy and raised him as a girl, and he didn't find out the truth until later, and that poor guy committed suicide. The Reimer twin boys, and so that was a scandal. That there's still not been a full reckoning over that, but that as a result of some of that and other John Money's sordid experiments, his clinic was closed. They shut a lot of that down, but it was reinvigorated. A lot of with the rise of gender ideology and the larger LGBTQ movement, that became reinvigorated, and so now some of these gender clinics in hospitals are being closed now due to federal agency action. But this, I mean, there's a whole long history of this stuff, and it's a very strange rabbit hole to fall down. But it is, when I zoom out, Heidi, and sort of look at sort of what this is spiritually, I just see this as a part of a cosmic battle of good and evil, a diabolical
Oh yeah, it
war.
all comes down to Satan. It all comes down to Satan. Attack the family, attack the
I can
people.
ignore that as a Christian. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's the human body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and so it bears the image of God as male and female. So naturally, the desecration of that and the ability to reproduce, sex organs, secondary sex traits, our humanity as a distinct sex, that is the target of diabolical rage. I can't ignore that spiritual perspective as a Christian. But
No.
even if you don't share my faith, I mean, I've met a lot of non-religious people and atheists and agnostics who are in this space who are just like, just from a scientific standpoint, it makes no sense to be calling men she, and just the human beings are a sexually dimorphic mammalian species.
Right.
And to try and lop off healthy body parts and stick artificial ones on when you know that the organism needs to function with all of its systems intact, you cannot in any reasonable way call this healthcare. And since when did sterilizing someone become fine as long as you wave a rainbow flag? I mean, we regard, as a crime, rightly so, black women prisoners in this country that had their fertility stripped from them. And the only time you administer drugs to someone that might foreclose their fertility is if you've got a cancer and you're trying to stop the spread of a physical disease, and you take chemo because you're trying to get at something that could really destroy your life. Okay. But at least that's a legitimate reason. A psychologically struggling person, you're going to sterilize them? In normal times, that would be seen as a scandal. But
Right.
it's not today because of the ascendancy of this ideology, which is a manipulative reversal from start to finish.
It's true. And by the way, you talk about the LGBTQ. There are plenty of LGBT gay
yes.
people who are absolutely against
Yes.
this. And they say, you take off the T, you take off the Q, you forget all that stuff. We're not involved in this. And I remember going on the air on my morning radio show, and the guy I was closest to at work was a gay guy, and he was in the hallway, and he said, you stay on this, because I was harping on kids and this. He said, you stay on this topic, because the gay people are not on board with this, and to put them in the same, and I know you're not, but the vast majority of them are going, this is wrong. And to your also another, I would piggyback on something you said that's important that I've experienced also. I've interviewed many parents who are absolutely not conservatives, who
Yeah.
are absolutely against this because
Hmm.
it's common sense. It's not a left or right issue. And that
Yep.
is important that it does cross all party lines.
It does. Yeah. It's a fascinating time because I'm, for example, I am very much a believer in historic Christian sexual ethics, but I will gladly talk to anyone, LGB identified or whatever. I don't care, like Republican, Democrat, like when you're cutting off the body parts of a kid, can we recognize the humanity of people, even if they're very ideologically different from, I mean, it's certainly we haven't all lost our minds to the point where even if there's strong disagreement on big consequential issues, come together. And I encourage all your listeners to do that too, because you do indeed find very left-wing people who they have that 1,000-foot stare. I fielded tons of phone calls from Democrat parents and other people who are like, I do not want this to happen to my child. This is just, it's caused me to question everything. LGB dissenters as well. Yes, I know some of those people, consider them friends. It is this is bring as ghoulish as it is. It's bringing a broad swath of people together. Now, politically, Democrats, for example, in state legislatures that, for example, in the last couple of years, there have been some, like about half the states, red ones and purple ones, Arizona and New Hampshire, they've crossed the aisle to vote with Republican-sponsored bills to prohibit transing children, and there have been some Democrats that have crossed the aisle. But broadly speaking, we still see a pretty clear divide between the parties. But Democrats on the ground, I hear from them all the time, are absolutely outraged that this has been unleashed, particularly framed in civil rights, which is just really offensive too, I think.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things also that we need to mention is besides becoming a lifetime medical patient, when you do these kinds of things and prescribe these kinds of drugs, because they don't get off them, they have to stay on them. The
Yeah.
effects of these drugs, weakening the bones and hurting the heart, and there are all kinds of things. You can look these up, and I'll link some things if I can find them on all of the side effects of these drugs. How many trans terrorists, you can use any phrase you want to, are
Yeah.
shooting up schools, and they never want to address the fact that these kids are trans kids, whatever you want to, whatever phase they're in, trans kids taking trans drugs that are clearly not helping them. And yet the media, I mean, if it was great, I don't know. I mean, it can't be because they're trans. It's got to be something else. They're complicit in covering up the fact they never, if it's not a white Trump supporter, they don't want to talk about who shot up the school. And this is it's a travesty.
It really, I mean, I think I've man, it's uncanny to see the number of incidents where, obviously the most famous one was Audrey Hale in Nashville shooting up that Christian school, and there was the Minnesota the shooting up that school too. It is alarming, and I haven't seen any definitive studies on it because it probably hasn't been done yet. But I really wonder if, when you overload your system with cross-sex hormones, how that doesn't destabilize you in some really consequential ways. And an endocrinologist that I know, for example, says that this whole treatment protocol, put that in air quotes, is so outrageous because if you go to an endocrinologist, say for a thyroid condition or something, the goal of that treatment is to balance your hormones. Well, the trans medical protocol deliberately takes your sex hormones out of
Right,
balance.
right.
It makes no sense. And so there's no way that you can be psychiatrically healthy if you've got, you're a woman with overloaded testosterone, synthetic testosterone in your system, or vice
Right.
versa with estrogen. You'd have to be unstable mentally. Whether you're psychiatrically unstable or not, there's still a moral dimension that we can't overlook.
Yeah.
But I legitimately wonder if some of these kids, these young people that are shooting up schools, are so, the way they've been drugged, if that's not really altering their state in a very consequential way, even though, again, it's clear moral evil at work too. But
Yeah.
what we have allowed and unleashed on these young people, drugging them with high levels of hormones that their bodies would never ordinarily have, it's a disgrace and an atrocity, I think.
Yeah. Well, you take a kid who's already disaffected.
Yeah.
Most of the time, most all the time, there's a divorce. There are two parents in the home. They're sitting in their dark room playing video games, whatever. They're already disaffected. They already feel like outsiders. So then this is the solution to them. They find an online community of people who think like they do and tell them this is what they need. Really, this is why they feel so like outsiders, which we've all felt like outsiders in school at some point, right? But now they feel like this is their new community. They get
Mhm.
on this community, they take these drugs. The drugs don't make them feel better. They're still an outsider. People think they're weird because no one's obligated to think, to applaud everything you do. And then they shoot up the school. And the thing that's so weird to me about that is that nobody wants to talk about the outsider feeling that a lot of these kids have that's not solved with this, and they don't want to talk about the family that's gone. And then there are families where there's divorce, and then one parent wants to go ahead with the transition and another parent doesn't. I remember reading a story years ago. I'm sure you read about it or wrote about it at the time, about a young lady who was about 16 years old who was threatening to kill herself if she didn't get to transition. So the judge gave custody of her to her grandparents who were okay with her transitioning. In America, a child was taken away from her parents so she could go get body parts cut off. Have not heard what happened then. But I mean, so it's not only interfering with the family in all kinds of ways, it's interfering with custody situations, parental rights. I mean, this agenda is just so entrenched.
I yeah, I think if that was the Ohio case, Judge Sylvia Hendon in Ohio, I believe that's the same one that you're referring to. There is not a single area of culture, there's not a single sphere where this monstrosity has not invaded. And I've got a piece that I'm working on now that I might publish soon, where I quote a therapist that I know who she's addressing the problem of why we can't stop talking about transgenderism, because I hear this all the time. Heidi was like, why are you so obsessed with this little small strange issue? This is just kind of a few people on the margins who just want to live their lives, and yeah, maybe there's a few little issues here and there, but this is not a big deal. That's the false framing, because what I would say, and this therapist said this, and I'm just going to paraphrase it now. She said, the reason that this is such an issue is because you mentioned custody, but it's the clearest lens through which we can see the disintegration of every single institution in Western society. Because when you introduce a lie about something so consequential as the sex of the body, and an Australian court recently, a couple months ago, ruled that sex is changeable, it was that high up. When you institute that kind of a lie, it can't help but demolish and destroy so much. Parental rights, prisons, child health care, education, media, arts and entertainment. This is everywhere, and it corrodes and corrupts and turns to ash everything it touches. And so you want to see the disintegration of Western society? Look no further than transgenderism, because that's at the root of so much of it.
Absolutely. And when this person was talking to you about why do you care about this issue? Well, I don't know, because I, as an American citizen, I want a military that's prepared. I don't want a bunch of people in sickbay with bandages on their crotches because
Yeah,
they had surgery at my expense when they're in the military, which I understand Trump stopped, but this was
yeah,
happening under Biden. I mean, this.
it's everywhere.
I'm going to calm
It's
down. Regardless of how you feel about this, the trans issue, folks, you cannot say it's okay for people to join the military, where military preparedness is the only goal they should have, and then allow you to go in and have surgery that could take you months or longer to recover from, and then lifelong medication. You used to be kicked out of the military if you had bad arches, flat feet. Right now, we're allowing you to get body parts cut off, and you're going to be in the trenches going, wait a minute, I need to take my pills. I mean, that's how insane this has gotten.
It. I mean, what struck me so much as I've been covering this for 10 years, if you read that piece that we referenced earlier,
Which I will once again link in the description for everyone to
thank you.
read.
Yeah, you'll see how this affects everything, and it's absolutely horrifying. This is top-down social engineering that is destroying so much. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you cannot overstate just how absolutely terrible this is. Yes, the whole military preparedness thing is a big thing, but just I guess what I would want to say is that you don't have to accept this. I mean, in a normal time, it would be headline news that doctors will go to work today and cut the breasts off of girls who are as young as 12 and 13.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't normal, guys. Like, this is not normal. Like, this normal would be adjudicating these crimes at tribunals. Like we would be, these are like, we need Nuremberg 2.0, please. Cutting the body parts from off of children. That's what we're doing. Some of that's being stopped now, thank God. But I think so many people are just that, like we said earlier, their consciences have been seared. They've just been so dulled, or they feel so powerless to stop it. I submit that I mean, if this doesn't prick your conscience, I don't know what does. And pastors and everybody else who might be listening, I implore you to be leading your congregations in prayer about this and seeking God's face as to what you can do, because if you can't speak up for the little children, I think, I mean, the Lord Jesus Christ takes it very personally when you
Yes, he
put them in
does.
harm's way.
Mhm.
I'd be investing stock in some millstone companies if I were you. You know,
Right. Yeah, you say you're against child abuse
yeah,
until this kind of thing is going on and you don't
right,
speak up against this. And you are right
right,
about the fact that there are pastors who don't have any courage. I don't know if you know my history, but about 10 years ago I was fired from a radio show for saying, not even on the air, but on social media, that kids do best with moms and dads. I know it's just horrible and controversial. It's
yeah,
true, but and that none of that matters because I win in the end. They didn't take anything from me. They think they did, but they didn't, because God's got me. All right, it wasn't even a religious statement. I don't care if you're Christian or not.
right.
Moms and dads are essential, right? So I didn't say that nobody else could raise kids, because clearly other people can, but ideally mom and dad. Anyway, the point is, the reason I mentioned that is because my husband ran into a pastor, I don't know, a couple months after this, because it was big news in my town at the time. And he ran into this pastor, and the pastor said, big church too, I agree with your wife, but if I say that from the pulpit, I'll lose my pension. Now, I didn't need him to defend me because I got God on my side. But the point is, when a cultural issue comes up, it wasn't about me or even mentioning me, but when a cultural issue comes up of any kind and it's being discussed, pastors need to be bold. There are many in America who still are bold, but a whole lot of them are hiding behind their skinny jeans and their big toothy grins and the choir, and not saying squat about what matters. And I hold them, and God will hold them to
Yeah.
extra account in the end of their lives.
You're going to be judged twice as hard, according to the scripture. I mean, it's
That's
just,
right.
it is a standard. I understand being a pastor is a hard job, and I want to have grace for them too, because I know there's all kinds of pressures that I face uniquely as a journalist. It's a different it's a different animal, and I don't want to be too hard on them. And yet I think that if you see children having their body parts cut off and you can't say anything about that, I would check your conscience, because that, I mean, again, it is not normal that we are allowing children to have their body parts cut off and calling it healthcare.
All right.
It's not normal.
All right.
Wake up, people. This is
And,
not okay.
right. And even if the Trump administration has put a stop to some of this, first of all, they're going to just recode what they're doing, to try to get around it. You know that, and I know that. But the saddest thing is, these parents who are taking their children to these clinics believe, what would you rather have, a daughter, or would you rather have a dead son? That's what they tell them. And that is
Right.
nonsense. And the suicide rate, is it 20 times higher with trans kids? 20, something
Well,
like that?
the big study, that if you're referring to the Swedish study, it was 19 times higher
Okay.
hazard of completed suicide. That was for post-operative transsexual adults from
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of trans activists like to poo-poo that study because it was adults in Sweden and whatever. But like, no, it's total emotional blackmail, and it's a terrible lie to tell and totally manipulative in a clinical setting for a doctor in a white coat and degrees on the wall to be telling a parent that your child's going to wind up dead unless you allow us to castrate him.
Right.
It's just hysterical.
It is.
Yeah.
I remember reading about a doctor years ago, a story. Might have been one of yours or somebody else's, and he was talking about, he said, I have 25-year-old men who come to me with the penises of 9-year-old boys,
Yeah.
and I can't fix that because they were given these drugs.
Blockers.
Right. And they're, and by the way, if you don't know what goes on with this thing, and then I don't want to get too graphic. Let me just try to be as kind as I can. When they cut off your male organs and then they try to create a vagina out of it, I mean, there are things that they have to put. What do they call the things that they have to put up in spacers? No, it's not spacers. What is it? Dilators. Yeah, they put things, folks. You got to know this if you don't know this already. They have to put things in their bodies in the successively larger to open up that opening to try to make it a vagina when it was never intended to be a vagina. If it offends you, I'm sorry, guys, but you need to know this. And I've seen people online, and I'll try to find some of those videos too and include them. People online talking about, yeah, this is me and my diet later, and I put this in, and you're never going to be okay. Infection kills people. And then regret kills people. And going back to what I said about the kids reaching out to community, when they find this community and then they suddenly have regrets because this didn't quite work out like they thought, that community totally disowns them. And then they had no community at home most of the time. Then they find this online community, they've completely disowned them. No wonder these kids lose all hope.
It's a cult of death, Heidi, and there's no point in glossing over it and not being as unequivocal as we can be. I mean, and it's this. A consistent comment that I got in response to the article is, this is like Dr. Mengele on steroids.
That's
And
right.
It really, you talk about, yes, they do have to dilate, because if men who have quote unquote bottom surgery, it will close up down there. And on the young boys, there are doctors that use part of the bowel tissue to make a fake female sex organ. I mean, that's like, again, this is not normal. It's not normal to cut off healthy body parts of children and use other tissue from other parts of their body to make fake ones and allow the doctors to profit off of them. I mean, I'm telling you, we need to be storming the heavens. I mean, I was glad to see last week the wolves in white coats report that the HHS department put out, because it looks like some referrals to the Justice Department for Medicaid billing fraud and other fraudulent activity is there's going to be some action from the government now. But this history of massive institutionalized medical child abuse must never be forgotten.
No.
I mean, this is an era of great shame for the medical profession that this was ever allowed. Something evil this way comes and has come. And even worse, though, I think, has been the media protection racket, because
Yes.
the doctors who have done this would never have gotten away with this were it not for the phalanx of sympathetic press that shrouded what they were doing in all kinds of euphemisms and deceptive language and ideological framing that was totally false. I mean, we're seeing thousands upon thousands of children, teenagers, and young people be completely sterilized and disfigured. And for what? For what? I mean, in about 5 or 10 years, I hope and pray that we don't see a bunch of suicides, but it wouldn't surprise me if we do, because this will wear off. This won't last. I mean, we already are seeing some. I know of cases where they see that the quote unquote transition didn't live up to its promises, and so they couldn't take it, and their bodies are ruined, and it's a cult of death. I mean, this is a disgraceful chapter in our history, and I'm glad to see some of the things happening in the government now, but there needs to be an even fuller reckoning and accounting for what's going on.
And to your point about that with the government, that's great, but at the end of the day, it's got to come from our hearts. And the idea, it doesn't matter what government does if people aren't willing to go along with it. We've got to try to get to people's hearts and make them understand what's really going on.
You've never, I don't think I've ever heard or seen anything like this issue that has made people question everything that they believe. For example, I'll get phone calls and messages from parents, not religious, not Christian, and they'll say things to me like, I never have believed in God, but I think I might believe in the demonic now, because I've never seen something so evil destroy my family. I've never seen something that has just caused me to think about what I think about good and evil. And this is just, it really sort of jolts people out of their stupor, and when it affects them personally, especially, because it ceases to be something sort of out there and esoteric and affecting a few people. When it's your own son or daughter or your cousin that is disintegrating right in front of your eyes, and your relationships and your families are fractured irretrievably, it really takes people to the edge of their sanity. And I know people who have sort of had ideological 180 shifts because of this issue, and it's really something. But I would just say too, the worst aspect about this is that people have not understood what this actually is because of the false framing and lies from the major media. I mean, I'll never forget CNN, one of the worst offenders, in my opinion, they are, in 2020, they wrote a piece just about puberty blockers. It was this cheery ad for puberty blockers. And the doctor that they quoted actually compared denying children puberty blockers as akin to denying asthmatics inhalers. That's how profound the lies are. CNN also reported, I think about that same year or the year after, that the phrase biological sex was a disputed term. Since when? 10 years ago? Male and female, like, that was not a disputed term. We all have eyes. If you wanna go get, eggs, don't get a rooster, get a hen. Like, this was not a controversial thing to say. I mean, but suddenly major media is telling us that biological sex is a disputed phrase or whatever. No,
Yeah.
discern the times, scrutinize what you read, and when you're being lied to, call it out. Live not by lies.
That's right. And also, let's never forget that these people want acceptance. I'm sorry, you don't accept yourself. You're the one chopping off body parts. You're the one taking medications. And if you chop off this, will you feel better? If you chop off that, will you accept yourself? You don't accept yourself. How can you expect me to accept you? You can't.
It never ends.
No.
And I've met parents who and others who just think that by going along with it, using the pronouns, you going sort of along, that things will just go on their merry way.
And my hunch is that those people were going along with their kids when they were 3 too.
Yeah.
In some cases, not in all, but I'm sure in some cases that they've always just gone along to whatever their child wanted to hold them for ransom for. But God bless you for what you've done for all these years. And I'm going to post all of this. I'm going to post as many things as I can find that I can legally post on my on the description, because people need to understand what the phalloplasty is and what's actually happening here, guys. And it's not a left or right issue, as we said. It's not even a Christian issue. It's an issue of children being permanently maimed, becoming medical eunuchs, and nobody screaming about it like they should be. Some people, but not as many as should be. And thank you, Brandon, for what you've done. I hope we talk again. I know you stay on a lot of the topics that I care very much about, like assisted suicide and things like that, which matter a lot to me. And we'll talk about that some other time. But to me, that's another issue that really says a lot about society. It's much larger than just whether grandma is in pain and going to die anyway. It's much larger than that. So we'll talk about that in a future podcast. I would love to have you.
Thank you. And I would just say, if you read the article, have your Pepto-Bismol handy. It's not for the faint of heart, but we have to confront this as it is.
Yeah, and I posted it on my socials, and I'll post it again. I told people, I said, this is a tough read, but you need to read this. You need to know this. Super important. God bless you, because, God is smiling when you're trying to do his work. He's trying to put the truth out there. People need to heed it, or at least know about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.